Welcome to December's ELE Focus Area presentation. This month, rather than adding a new focus area, each school is going to use the month to review the steps taken so far and to reflect on how the focus area implementation is going at the school level. First, we're going to go back to our year-long focus, increasing our EL students' ability to engage in academic discourse. We want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of this big picture goal because it is what's driving our topics each month. Then, we're going to take a bird's eye view of the monthly focus areas and how each one builds on the one from the month before. This will help us get our bearings for what we've already done and give us some context for where we're going for the rest of the year. We've also developed classroom descriptors for the first 3 months, and we'll take a look at them and then try them out with a video clip. First, let's go back to what academic discourse is. Academic discourse refers to the conversations we have when we interact with academic ideas. Academic discourse can be either oral or written, so we engage in academic discourse when we have an oral debate with someone about a topic from a content area. We also engage in academic discourse when we read an article and then prepare a response to an idea from that article. We have 3 primary reasons to engage in academic discourse. First, we engage in academic discourse to learn and understand new content. This is the essence of learning. Second, we engage in academic discourse to clarify our understanding of that content. We do that as we actively question the new learning and how it fits in, or doesn't fit in, with our prior knowledge and experience. Finally, we engage in academic discourse to expand on those concepts. We do that by interacting with the ideas of others and making connections and extensions. Being proficient in academic discourse is a very sophisticated thing. We want our students, including our ELL students, to be proficient in this, and so we began to think through the steps necessary to arrive at that destination. The ELE department analyzed the components of teaching ELs how to engage in academic discourse, and then developed a scope and sequence that spans the school year. The first step was to lay the foundation that every lesson should include opportunities for students to interact with the 4 language domains: speaking, writing, reading, and listening, or SWIRLD. The idea is not that teachers will develop separate mini-lessons for each domain within the larger lesson. Instead, it's about the thinking that happens at the lesson planning stage and considering how activities can be tweaked or incorporated so that all students practice all 4 domains in a natural way. Once students are using all 4 domains of language in class, then we need to think about the supports that we provide to ELL students, especially those at the earlier proficiency levels. Specifically, we focused on sentence frames as a way to support our students' language production when they're speaking and writing. To maximize the impact that sentence frames can have on students, we said that we need to insist that all students of all proficiency levels will speak and write in complete sentences. This expectation is reasonable and attainable when we are clear and upfront about this expectation with the students, when we explain and demonstrate what is meant by complete sentences, and then when we support them to the level that they need. The second condition that maximizes the use of sentence frames is when we incorporate wait time as a common practice or a routine with the students. Again, this requires us to explain and demonstrate its use with our students. Producing complete sentences is a starting point, but it's not enough for academic discourse. That is why in November, we looked at ways to provide students with opportunities to engage in meaningful conversations that required extended responses by incorporating discussion protocols. We know that everyone uses turn and talk. It's fast, it's easy, you can do it on the fly. However, if we want our students to be engaged in academic conversations that are more meaningful, then we have to be more intentional about the routines and protocols that we use. We can use a number of protocols and routines to get students involved in academic conversations. How do we decide which ones will give us the results we want? When we are talking about having even our earlier proficient students participate, there are at least 5 major considerations we need to make. First, we need to make sure that students have lots of opportunities to talk with partners. Talking with a partner first allows an ELL to try out their new language within a safe context. They have an opportunity to practice the new vocabulary and to rehearse what their response could be. That's what makes Turn and Talk so good. However, to really maximize learning for students, this partner talk should be done in conjunction with other protocols. There are a variety of discussion protocols available that, when we embed quick partner talks in them, provide a great deal of support for our ELLs and stretches them in their academic language. Second, as we consider how to effectively use discussion protocols, we need to make sure that we are requiring all students to participate. There are no free rides. This may mean thinking through turn-taking techniques or not sharing a second idea until everyone else has shared their first. This consideration also means that we protect students' airtime by not allowing a few students to monopolize a discussion. Some teachers use calling cards or talking stick to address this. Third, we need to make sure that students have the linguistic supports that they need to be successful. This is where we may go back to the sentence frames from last month, but now adapt them to a particular protocol. We might also think about linguistic supports that go beyond sentence frames. We might have a reference sheet available for students that include frames, but also a bank of useful vocabulary terms for the discussion. They might have examples of the terms used in a sentence, or there might be a simple chart that shows a few keywords in their different forms. For example, in a discussion about food chains, a simple chart might include the various forms of producer, produce, production, increasing the student's ability to produce more precise language. This fourth consideration is very important. As students are using their academic language, they are going to be imprecise. They may over-apply a language rule or feature that they've recently encountered. They may strategically use some linguistic workarounds to compensate for language that they do not own yet. For example, in a case where they do not know how to form the past tense, they may say the verb in the present tense and then say, but before, or in past, to indicate the past tense. Either way, they are producing language approximations. They are trying, but they are not yet there. We need to be sure that we accept these language approximations and that we value them. It takes a lot of courage to take a risk to say something when you know that it's probably not accurate. Since we want students to continue to participate, we have to make sure that it's safe to take risks. We also have to think through when and how to give feedback to students. Do we do it indirectly, by paraphrasing or modeling? Do we do it directly by giving quick clarification? Do we do it in the moment or file it away for a different time? Whatever route we take, we want to make sure that we factor that into consideration when we select a discussion protocol. Finally, we want to consider how a discussion protocol will underscore our expectation that all students are required to produce extended responses. This consideration might influence which protocol we use. It might influence how we vary a protocol or even add extra supports for students who need them in order to participate in a meaningful way. Moving forward, we will continue to add layers each month. One area we will focus on is language functions, the ways we use language for academic purposes. Language functions include explaining, describing, making a claim and supporting it with evidence, sequencing, and comparing and contrasting. These language functions each have their own language structures, vocabulary, phrases, and patterns that are unique to each of them. When we make a claim and then justify it with evidence, there are organizational patterns that we are expected to use. There are common phrases to indicate which statement is the main argument and which statements are the supporting evidence. There are transitional words that help to distinguish shifts in the thinking. For ELLs, learning about language functions and how to navigate them is important. First, by their very nature, language functions and their corresponding structures Define the texts students will read, the presentations they will encounter, and the written and oral responses that they will develop. To make sense of a text of a written argument, ELLs need to understand the format of an argument structure and the signal phrases and vocabulary. Second, learning about language functions is strategic because language functions cut across all content areas. When a student develops their proficiency in comparing and contrasting, that student is able to transfer that knowledge and skill to math, to science, to ELA, to social studies, to whatever content area that's being learned. Next, we go back to the idea of providing students with linguistic supports. In October, we looked at sentence frames specifically as a way to support ELLs producing language. At this point, we will return to supporting our students linguistically, but now with an eye on differentiating those supports based on the proficiency level of our students. As we know from the can-do descriptors, the types of language tasks that early proficiency students can do independently are different than those that later proficiency students can do. Therefore, their support should be different if we want both of them to be engaged in academic discourse. Also, a student's proficiency level should be continuously developing. The types of supports they needed earlier in the year may no longer be the right match for them now. That is why at this point in the year, we will revisit and fine-tune how we support our students linguistically. The final layer we will add this year is academic vocabulary. We will look at how we strategically select vocabulary terms that our students need to have in order to successfully engage in academic discourse. We will look at some research-based considerations as we think about how we engage our students in academic vocabulary development and various strategies and protocols that are consistent with this research. One of the tools the district has developed is a list of classroom descriptors for the first 3 focus areas. These statements describe what students would be doing or what practices would be in place in a classroom where each of the focus areas is being implemented. For example, as a result of focusing on SWIRL, lessons would incorporate the 4 language domains, and students would be speaking and listening while having academic conversations, as well as reading and writing for academic purposes. As a result of focusing on sentence frames and linguistic supports, students would be accustomed to producing complete sentences and practicing wait time during class discussions. They would also have access to sentence frames and use them in their language production. Finally, as a result of focusing on protocols for academic discourse, all students would be participating in intentionally designed academic discussions that include opportunities for students to confer with partners and other grouping configurations. Students would also be making use of support structures in order to provide extended responses during these interactions. Take a look at these descriptors. Which ones do you currently see on a regular basis already? Which ones are not so frequent but you'd like to see more of? At this point, we're going to watch a video of a classroom with students engaging in academic discourse. As you watch this video, keep an eye out for the examples of the different classroom descriptors. What are the students doing that show evidence of those descriptors? What is the teacher doing or saying? What artifacts from the lesson or from around the room show that these 3 areas have been focused on in this classroom?